Now the erythro means red blood cells and poiesis means production. So simply erythropoiesis is the production of the RBCs. So we are going to have how the erythrocytes are produced, the process and its regulation. Sites of RBC production vary over the lifespan, starting from the yolk sac in the early embryonic life. In the fetal life, middle trimester of gestation, RBCs are produced from the liver primarily and somewhat from the spleen and the lymph nodes. Last month of gestation and after birth, the bone marrow takes over and becomes the exclusive site for the RBC production. In adults, this is only from the bone marrow normally, but if it is occurring from extramedullary tissue, for example, spleen or lymph node or liver, we call it extramedullary hematopoiesis, and that occurs in a diseased state only. Fetal erythropoiesis occurs in yolk sac, liver, spleen, bone marrow, and you can use this mnemonic YLSP to memorize the timeline. Yolk sac for 3 to 8 weeks, then middle trimester 6 weeks till birth liver. Spleen takes over in 10 to 28 weeks, and 18 weeks onward, bone marrow takes over. Young liver synthesizes blood. This is the mnemonic that I use to memorize this. Now, what is bone marrow? That's what we eat. It's a soft, high cellular tissue that fills the internal cavities of the bones. Now, there is two types of bone marrow, red versus yellow bone marrow, and only the red bone marrow is what is capable of undergoing erythropoiesis. Red bone marrow is actively producing blood cells, whereas yellow bone marrow is incapable because it is instead replaced by the fatty tissue. 75% of the cells in bone marrow belongs to white blood cells producing myeloid series, and only 25% are destined to become the red blood cells. So can you think of why is that so? Although there are more RBCs circulating in the blood, but less committed cells to become RBCs in the bone marrow at the time point. If we compare the bone marrow activity by age, that also keeps on changing with age. If you have a look at this graph, age on the x-axis and cellularity on the y-axis, you can see with age, the tibia and femur, they stop producing RBCs around 20 years of age, and afterwards only short flat bones, they remain capable of producing blood cells, including vertebra, sternum, and ribs, and that potential decreases a little bit by the old age. So from birth to 5 years old, all bone marrows are capable. From 5 years to 20 years of age, marrow in the long bones only, femur, humerus, that becomes inactive, except the proximal humeri and tibia. And after 20 years, this is now limited to only membranous bones. And with aging, even the membranous bones will gradually decrease in their capacity to form the red blood cells. Hematopoiesis, blood cell formation that begins from multipotent hematopoietic stem cell. Now, what does that mean? Stem cell is, as you know, the cell that is capable of producing other cell, and we call it multipotent because it is capable of producing any blood cell. Hematopoietic blood cell. So, any blood cell can be produced from the multipotent hematopoietic stem cell. In the next step, it becomes committed to form either colony forming unit spleen or colony lymphoid stem cell. Now the colony forming unit spleen, this can produce either the erythrocytes or it can produce granulocytes, monocytes or the platelets. Whereas the lymphoid stem cells, these are capable of only producing lymphocytes, either T or B lymphocytes. So multipotent hematopoietic stem cell can produce any blood cell, whereas lymphoid stem cell and colony forming unit spleen are little bit specified. In the next step, the colony-forming unit spleen with the help of differentiation inducers can become committed either to RBC lineage, WBC lineage, or platelet lineage. If it is destined to become erythrocyte, it will convert into colony-forming unit blast, or it will convert into colony-forming unit granulocyte monocyte if WBCs, or colony-forming unit megakaryocyte if it is going to form platelets. Right now we are discussing erythropoiesis. So our step 1 is multipotent hematopoietic stem cells converting into colony-forming unit spleen, which will convert into colony-forming unit blast. This will convert into colony-forming unit erythrocyte, which is capable of only forming erythrocytes now. So multipotent hematopoietic stem cells versus committed stem cells, what is the difference? All blood cells can originate from a multipotent hematopoietic stem cells. This is located in the bone marrow, and these are undifferentiated cells. And a pool of non-committed stem cells or multipotent stem cells is continuously maintained in the bone marrow so that they can convert into any committed stem cells as per the need. Whereas the committed stem cells are committed to become a specific cell type, and the examples are in front of you: erythrocyte, granulomonocyte, or megakaryocyte. So if you are going to have a bone marrow transplant for a patient, which type of cell would you use? A committed stem cell or a multipotent hematopoietic stem cell? Of course, a multipotent cell. Regulation of blood cell formation is done by growth inducers and differentiation inducers. How they are different? The growth inducers will stimulate the proliferation of all types of stem cells. They do not initiate differentiation. For example, interleukin-3, a very important growth inducers, will increase almost the growth of all the committed cells or multipotent hematopoietic stem cells, but will not make them differentiate into any other cell. Whereas the differentiation inducers are there to induce differentiation. For example, from colony-forming unit spleen to colony-forming unit erythrocyte or granulocyte monocyte, this is the function of a differentiation inducer. As you can see in this image, different differentiation inducers and growth inducers. These are growth inducers, which are growing hematopoietic stem cells. And these are the differentiation inducers: interleukin-4, granulocyte monocyte colony stimulating factor, monocyte colony stimulating factor, and what else I can see? Granulocyte monocyte, granulocyte colony stimulating factor, interleukin-5. These are the differentiation inducers as well. This is the internal capability of body, and there are external controls as well, which may regulate, increase or decrease the erythropoiesis. For example, low oxygen level will stimulate RBC production. Infections may stimulate WBC production on exposure to an antigen, and much more. Let's get back to the stages of erythropoiesis. We started from multipotent hematopoietic stem cell, colony-forming unit spleen, colony-forming unit blast, and colony-forming unit erythrocyte. What will this colony-forming unit erythrocyte then do? Undergo these many stages to convert into the erythrocytes that we are going to discuss one by one. So starting from the proerythroblast, which was formed from the colony-forming unit erythrocyte. This proerythroblast, as you can see over here, is the first identifiable precursor in the RBC lineage. It will divide multiple times to eventually form many mature RBCs. So first identifiable cell. Next, it will convert into basophilic erythroblast. It stains with basic dyes due to high RNA content. As you can see, the basic dye in the cytoplasm, and it has a very high RNA content, which is going to translate into proteins. Specifically, which protein? The hemoglobin protein, and of course many others. This basophilic erythroblast will then convert into polychromatophilic erythroblast. Polychromatophile erythroblast means it is taking both the acidic and the basic dye. Basic dye again because of the RNA content, and acidic dye because hemoglobin is now there, which stains with the acidic dye. So it is polychromatophile staining both blue and pink by the eosine and hematoxylin dyes. And you may be asked, hemoglobin first appears at which stage of erythropoiesis? So this is the stage, polychromatophilic erythroblast, at which the hemoglobin first appears. Next, the hemoglobin gets even more concentrated and the cell majorly uptakes the acidic dye, and we now call it orthochromatic erythroblast. As you can see, the basophilic stain is gone and eosinophilic stain is here, the acidic stain, because of abundance of hemoglobin now. Number two important thing that occurs over here, you can see condensation of the nucleus. It has started decreasing in size, plus resorption of the endoplasmic reticulum. Now what the RBCs needed is almost already being formed, so the organelles have started extruding themselves. The nucleus started shrinking and endoplasmic reticulum started to disappear at the level of orthochromatic erythroblast. At the stage of reticulocyte, the nucleus is gone and most organelles are lost. Still, there is some basophilic material because of the remnants of the Golgi apparatus and the mitochondria. Reticulocytes are the level of the cells that can enter circulation from the bone marrow via diaphoresis. So till here, from the multipotent hematopoietic stem cell till the formation of reticulocyte, everything was happening inside the bone marrow, and reticulocytes can now enter the blood and convert there into the mature erythrocytes. To convert into mature erythrocyte, the reticulocytes will lose the rest of the Golgi apparatus and mitochondria and become fully mature erythrocytes. It may take 1 to 2 days in the bloodstream for our reticulocyte to convert into mature RBCs. At one time point, if you look at the peripheral blood smear, there will be only less than 1% of circulating RBCs in the healthy individual. Rest of them should be the mature RBCs. If the reticulocyte count is less than 1, maybe 0.1%, 0.2%, much less than 1, we would suspect there is something wrong with the bone marrow and the reticulocyte count is low. And if it is more than 1, we would suspect there is excessive erythropoiesis for some reason, maybe same in case of the hemolytic anemias. So let me quickly revise the steps of erythropoiesis for you. We started from multipotent hematopoietic stem cell that converted into colony-forming unit spleen, that converted into colony-forming unit blast, that converted into colony-forming unit erythrocyte, that formed the proerythroblast. It was highly basophilic and first identifiable RBC precursor. That converted to basophilic erythroblast. Again, it had a high RNA content, and polychromatic erythroblast, first hemoglobin started to appear. That is why it started uptaking the acidic stain. Hemoglobin got more concentrated, nucleus shrunk, endoplasmic reticulum got shrunk, the acidic dye was increased, and orthochromatic erythroblast appeared at the level of reticulocyte. Nucleus was gone, most organelles were gone, just remnants of mitochondria and Golgi apparatus. It came to the blood, and the 1 to 2 days it converted to erythrocytes, and the remnants of mitochondria and Golgi apparatus were also gone. And we found this shape of the RBCs by the arrangement of the transmembrane proteins, which is a biconcave disc, thickest at the peripheries and thinner in the center. Can you guess? Hemoglobin started appearing at polyerythrochromatic stage. It continued till which stage of the erythropoiesis? Please have a look at this again and try to guess. If you don't find the answer, you can contact me again. Okay, for your ease, hemoglobin started appearing at the polyerythrochromatic chromatophilic stage, and it was being synthesized in the reticulocyte stage, whereas the mature RBCs can no more synthesize the hemoglobin. Now let's move on towards the regulation of red blood cell production, and majorly in response to the erythropoiesis. for which we will take this example of this flowchart from the guidance. As you can see over here, the hematopoietic stem cells, proerythroblast red cells being produced. This is the flowchart showing the steps of erythropoiesis. And at this level, where hematopoietic stem cells are being converted to proerythroblast, there is a precursor erythropoietin coming from the kidney, which is speeding up the differentiation of hematopoietic stem cells to the proerythroblast. So it's a differentiation inducing factor which is stimulating the production of erythrocytes and is coming from the kidney. We call it erythropoietin. Now, when this erythropoietin will be produced, this will be produced anytime when there is decreased oxygen availability to the tissue. That can happen for any reason. For example, it can happen if the blood volume is low. If blood volume is fine but RBCs are low, anemia. If the RBCs are incapable of producing hemoglobin, low hemoglobin, there is poor blood flow, any pulmonary disease in which the RBCs are not getting completely oxygenated. Whenever the peripheral body tissue will sense hypoxia, decreased tissue oxygen, they will stimulate erythropoietin production, and that erythropoietin will stimulate RBC production. As soon as more RBCs will come to the bloodstream, tissue oxygenation will be fine and the erythropoietin production stimulus will be gone. So basically, erythropoietin primary regulator is the tissue oxygen level. Whenever there is hypoxia, there is more erythropoietin and more RBC production. Conditions that can stimulate RBC production, for example, anemia, for example, by hemorrhage. If there is bone marrow destruction, there will be less RBCs, less oxygen available and more erythropoietin. High altitude, you are inhaling at low oxygen, partial pressure of oxygen. Again, peripheral hypoxia and stimulation of erythropoietin production. Any circulatory and pulmonary disease that will decrease tissue oxygen supply will again stimulate the production of erythropoietin and hence the production of RBCs. Now, what is this erythropoietin? It's basically a glycoprotein and it is essential for erythropoiesis, without which hypoxia will not be capable of stimulating RBC production. It is a necessary precursor. Primary stimulus for erythropoietin production is hypoxia, but there are other stimuli as well. For example, norepinephrine, epinephrine, and the prostaglandins. Sources of erythropoietin is majorly kidney, 90% coming from the kidney, only 10% from the liver. In case of renal failure, the person may undergo severe anemia because of lack of erythropoietin and thus the lack of stimulus for the erythropoiesis. Now, from where in the kidneys the erythropoietin is produced? Mostly from the interstitial cells near the renal tubules in the cortex, and possibly some renal epithelial cells as well, but mostly from the interstitial cells of the kidney tubules. So, how erythropoietin is produced? This is what we just discussed. Let's quickly overview it again. Hypoxia will stimulate the production of these transcription factors known as hypoxia-inducible factors in the kidney tissue. These transcription factors will increase the transcription of a gene called hypoxia-responsive gene, which will transcribe and translate the erythropoietin gene, promoting the transcription and ultimately the formation of the erythropoietin. So hypoxia is going to modulate the genetic machinery, the transcription factors, to increase the genetic machinery working for production of the erythropoiesis. Now, as the genetic machinery is involved, so this is going to take some time. It's not just a matter of a few seconds or minutes that hypoxia occurs and here there are more RBCs. It will take some hours to increase the erythropoietin production, and then erythropoietin will take some time to act on the bone marrow and increase the RBC production that will ultimately come into the bloodstream. The erythropoietin production may begin within minutes to hours of hypoxia, and peak level of erythropoietin will be achieved within 24 hours. RBCs, however, will appear in circulating blood after 5 days because from multipotent hematopoietic stem cells till the formation of mature RBCs, There are multiple steps that require ample time to undergo. Major role of erythropoietin is at this level to convert hematopoietic stem cells to the proerythroblast. And luckily, synthetic erythropoietin is now available in the market by the name of Epogen, Procrit, and some others. And it's a $1 billion industry and used for the stimulation of erythropoiesis in patients, for example, of renal failure and those undergoing some sort of chemotherapy. So, can you think of some other factors that can regulate the rate of erythropoiesis? We have just discussed a few. And I'm going to share you a list of few factors that you can give a review, which are of course necessary modulators of the rate of erythropoiesis other than hypoxia and erythropoietin. Thank you very much for listening. Allah Hafiz.